Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the minor prophets by beginning a study of the prophet Zephaniah, probably one of the least known of the prophets, and yet he's written a beautiful little book, and it has such a great amount of historical interest as well. The book of Zephaniah is a brief book. It only has in it 3 chapters, about the same length as the book of Habakkuk that we just finished. And it's really looking forward to the same events that Habakkuk looks forward to, which is the Babylonian captivity and what happens beyond. It is an oracle of judgment against the members of the nation of Judah, those who are left. The northern kingdom has already been carried off into captivity decades before, a century before, and nearly anyway. And so the folks in the tribe of Judah and Benjamin are the ones who are left, centered around Jerusalem. It sees in the distance, and well, not even in the distance, in what will shortly take place in their history, the coming of the Babylonians and the carrying away into captivity. It's also a book of judgments on the surrounding nations. Some of the surrounding nations will look at that, but it's also a looking forward to the preservation of a remnant, the return to Jerusalem, and the coming of the Messiah. It is a book that talks about the day of the Lord in multiple ways. The day of the Lord is the coming armies that will carry them into captivity. The day of the Lord is also their return to Jerusalem. And then ultimately the day of the Lord is the coming of the Messiah. Just a reminder that in the prophets, when you read about the day of the Lord, or you read apocalyptic, and we'll read some apocalyptic in this book too, not as much as we're going to get in Zephaniah, but we read a bit of apocalyptic in this book too. It doesn't always mean the end of time. In the same book, it can mean multiple things. And the day of the Lord in this book does mean multiple things. And we'll notice that as we read the text. We're going to take a couple of sessions to introduce this book. I want to give you the historical background that we gather from the very first verse today. And then tomorrow we'll talk about the book, its themes, its keywords and thoughts, and the important lessons that it teaches, and then we'll get into the text of the book of Zephaniah. Today, I just want to read chapter 1, verse 1, the word of the Lord of Yahweh, which came to Zephaniah, son of Cushi, son of Gedaliah, son of Amariah, son of Hezekiah, in the days of Josiah, son of Ammon, king of Judah. Okay, so we have a lot of important information that we need to unpack from this very first verse. The name Zephaniah means God has hidden, God has treasured, God has protected. It can mean all three of those things. I think for the purposes of this book, we focus on the meaning God has protected, because one of the key themes in this book is the Lord surrounding us like an electron shell, protecting us from outside forces, or has he opened us up and laid us bare to our invaders? And so I think we focus on that nuance of the meaning Zephaniah. Any name that ends in IAH ends in Yahweh, okay? So Micah's name, shortened form of Micaiah, who is like God, Zephaniah, he whom God has protected, God has treasured, God has hidden. And any name that ends in El ends in the word God, because the Hebrew word for God is El, Elohim. So that's just a little extra information as you study your Old Testament. He says that he is a descendant of Hezekiah, the king, good King Hezekiah, and he's prophesying during the days of Josiah. So the Hezekiah is the good king, perhaps the best king that God's people have ever had. But during Hezekiah's day, their nation was devastated by the Assyrians. And they came under the threat, the influence of the Babylonians during that time. The nation of Judah has survived the evil reign of Manasseh, the evil king, the son of Hezekiah, who just did everything he could to undo his father's legacy, who pursued every form of idolatry in the book. He didn't believe in any of it. He just wanted to offend God as deeply as he could. And of course, at the end of his life, he came to repentance. It's beautiful, one of the most beautiful stories in the Bible, and began to return the people to the worship of the one true God. But God's judgment and the series of events, the consequences of their sin have already been set in motion, even before Hezekiah was king, as we read in the prophet Micah. So Babylonian captivity is going to happen. During the days of Josiah, this is his cousin. He's of the royal family, and King Josiah is the last good king that God's people have before they go into captivity. And yet he makes a fatal mistake, and I mean that literally. He's killed. Whenever Pharaoh Necho is traveling north to come to the aid of the Assyrians, because the Babylonians were threatening them, to come to the aid of the Assyrians to try to maintain the balance of power in the Mediterranean world and the Mesopotamian world, in order to maintain that balance. And trying to get to the Battle of Carchemish, he has to pass through Judah to get there. I mean, that's just the geography of it. And he sends word to Josiah, and we can read about this in 2 Kings chapters 22 and 23, also in the Chronicles, and says, listen, I got no beef with you. I just want to pass through. But Pharaoh Necho goes out and, Josiah goes out and tries to stop Pharaoh Necho, trying to aid and abet the Babylonians whenever they're the ones that are going to haul his nation into captivity. And Necho says, listen, did your God tell you to do this? Because if he didn't, why are you coming out here? Because I'll dispatch you in short order if you mess with me. But I don't want any problems. I just want to pass through. And he went out and tried to stop Pharaoh Necho, and Josiah is killed in battle. This hasn't happened yet because he's still king. But it's about to happen. And then the series of events that leads to their demise in Babylonian captivity takes place in just a few years. And they go through kings as quickly as Henry VIII went through wives at the end of his life. So anyway, that's the historical background of what's about to happen in their history, and that is what Zephaniah is prophesying about. Okay, tomorrow we're going to talk about the book itself, the text, introduce the text, and talk about its themes and the theme words. Thank you for joining me today. We'll pick up again there next time.